Antique prices are skyrocketing. Individuals and collectors are purchasing items from every possible genre within the antiques universe, and all is well in the industry. Is that what's really going on? Well, we're going to talk about it right after this. Well, hello my antique loving friends, it's Gregory here with Antique Acquisitions. Now for those of you that are followers of the channel, you'll know that in the last episode we actually went to Round Top and we interviewed some of the dealers. We talked to them about some of the goods that they had for sale. We took a look around some of the tents and the stalls to see what else was available out there, and it was just a fun time. But we didn't really discuss the trends as to what was selling, what was happening with the prices, and so that's what I want to do today. And I do want to still look back at Round Top just a little bit, because that's one of the most recent big shows that we have that can really tell us something about what's going on in the industry right now. And from what I can tell, it seems like there was a fair bit of excitement about what was selling. And when you ask, well, was it this, was it that, was it the other thing, was it mid-century, was it Victorian, was it Edwardian? The answer seems to be that it was just about everything. And I think that's a good sign for the antiques industry. And the prices, as near as I can tell, held up quite well. So we seem to continue with the appreciation that we've seen over the last few years. The prices are holding up, or at least they were. Now, from my perspective as a dealer, I would say that right now we're kind of in the summer doldrums, if you want to call it that. Things are a little bit slow right now, at least in my practice. But back to the show, the general consensus seems to be that everything was selling and that prices were high. So I've got an article here, and I'm not going to do a lot of reading like I did a few times back. I got a little criticism for doing too much reading rather than talking. But in this particular article, they did a few interviews with folks, and the consensus seemed to be that some of the dealers were comparing what's going on right now to a resurgence of the kind of demand and interest that you might have seen 30, 40 years ago. And so that's definitely a good thing. Now, there is a little bit of a difference. I've talked to some, in addition to the reading that I've done, I've talked to some of my own friends who are dealers, and obviously I have my own experience to draw from as well. My experience is a little bit different since my operation is entirely online. I very seldom get to meet in person the people that actually are purchasing my items, and a lot of times I really don't know who they are, what field they're in, how old they are, things like that, whereas some of my other dealer friends who have a little more face-to-face contact can help fill me in on that. So I've talked to specifically 3 different dealer friends of mine. One of them up in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so he kind of has a finger on the pulse of what's going on in that market, in the retail market, the physical market there. And the other 2, one of them are both kind of centered around Austin area. And the dealer up in Dallas, he deals with the same type of things that I do. So we're talking about, for me, everything from 17th century forward, heavily carved wood furniture for the most part. And so he kind of fills me in on what's going on up there, and we'll talk about that just a little bit. My friends here in Austin, one of them is younger. She's in her early 30s, and the other one has been in the business for a long time. And she sells, and each of those have their own niche of what they sell. My younger friend dealer tends to focus more on the mid-century modern type of furniture, which seems to be pretty hot here in the Austin area. Seems to move pretty quickly for her. She did mention that recently she's seen a bit of a slowdown in the mid-century style, and the farmhouse look, the French provincial farmhouse look, has really sold well for her. And she mentioned that some of the smaller, cheaper little items are selling, and I've actually noticed that in my store as well, though I don't deal too much with the lower value items. I love them, but for my business model, it just doesn't work. I have to stick with things that are higher priced. And what I find interesting about that is that 2 videos back, I did a video on trends in antiques, and one of the general themes of that was that we might be starting to see a bit of a switch away from mid-century modern to more of an Art Deco trend, or the old world aesthetic, the old world money, the idea that the historical objects are nice to have in your home to give you that feeling of a life well lived, I think was the quote. And so there is, that kind of follows upon that trend. And I asked her, I said, typically what would you say is the age range for the folks that you're dealing with that are buying your mid-century modern items? And she said anywhere from about 30s and 40s are basically who she deals with, and that seem to be following her and buying her items. And this really isn't a surprise. We're in Austin. Austin's a young town, and there is a certain movement among some sectors to go green or conserve resources and repurpose older items. And so I think you're definitely seeing a little bit of that going on. And from what I can tell, some of the other articles too suggest that I don't know if it's just that or if it's also the resurgence in some of these series like Netflix. I mean, it started off with Downton Abbey, and then you've got several other Netflix series that are set in the early 1900s, the Edwardian era, and before the Victorian era, and that may be bringing some attention to that type of decor, that style. So that may be part of it. And then of course you have the trend towards going green, and those may be some of the things that are influencing the younger folks in their 30s and 40s. Now, the other dealer that I spoke with, she's a very seasoned dealer, very experienced dealer, spends a lot of time in Europe bringing things over. She also deals with mid-century things. And some of the sideboards that you see, not the carved sideboards, but other sideboards and sunbursts and things like that you might see in the middle of the 20th century. She deals with a lot of that stuff. She has kind of her own look, some painted furniture. And she tells me that 35 to 55 is the market that she sees buying the most of what she is selling. And I think this goes back to what we mentioned earlier, that pretty much everything is selling according to the folks that were doing the interview at Round Top, and that's a good thing. I actually just had a discussion with a friend of mine. He's actually a relative that I ran into at a family reunion, and he is into space paraphernalia. So I thought that was interesting because we did pay lip service to that topic 2 videos back in the Trends in Antiques. So we've got that going on, and from my own perspective, obviously as someone who deals on the higher end of antiques, and speaking with my friend in Dallas who also basically deals in the same type of thing. Highly carved 18th, 19th century furniture. I think the prices have definitely gone up over the past couple of years, and it would not surprise me if they continued to do so. For those of you who follow what's going on in the government, obviously we just passed a huge spending bill. There appears to be no end in sight to the spending, and if you are a Austrian economics school person, and that's my background is economics, finance and economics, you have to believe that inflation is strictly a monetary phenomenon. So as the government spends more money that it doesn't have and the Fed then prints it, then you're going to continue to see inflation in every area of the economy, and we're seeing that now. So I think you have to attribute part of the rise in antiques prices to that inflation, but that's not necessarily all of it, because over the last 4 or 5 years, you've seen more and more people, it seems to me, become interested in it, and the younger folks are becoming more interested in it. And the other factor that I think we need to mention here is what I would refer to in the financial industry. It's called disintermediation. And basically what that means is that the buyer goes directly to the seller of a product. So rather than going through a bank and a brokerage, if the market's becoming disintermediated, then you're able to get that product directly from its source rather than having to go through the middleman. And I think you're seeing a little bit of that happening to antiques dealers as well, because as more and more people move online and have access to the sources that antique dealers traditionally use to purchase a lot of their inventory, you're going to have a little bit of that disintermediation. And so as more and more people find these online sources, the prices are going to go up. The dealers are going to be competing more and more with their own customers, and prices are going to go up all the way around. So I think that's another thing that's probably driving prices higher. And it's a bit of a disintermediation effect. Now, from the standpoint of heavily carved antiques, which is the specialty of Old Europe Antique Home Furnishings, which is my store, I would say that the first quarter was very good. A lot of product moving. We're in the doldrums right now. This is the summer, and I find that each year during this time of year, you do see things slow down a little bit. So I'm not sure that I want to use the last month or two as a gauge for that. I noticed that the smaller, cheaper items have continued to sell, whereas some of the bigger furniture seems to be, those purchases perhaps are being put off until the fall. Fall usually cranks up around October. September, October, things start getting pretty good until February. But some of the, and to back up that point, some of the customers that I have had make those purchases of large items for their new homes or their projects or whatever it is that they're working on, have indicated that they are in no rush to get these things because they really don't plan on moving in to their homes and using them until August. So I think that's definitely another factor in what's happening right now. When you look at the economic data, you know, a lot of you say, well, the US dollar's been falling against some of the European currencies now for a month or two. And obviously that's going to impact the prices moving forward as well if we're paying more euros for these items. And I have to, a disclaimer, my practice is based on Europe. It's Old Europe Antique Home Furnishings, so I'm not the guy to ask about Asian antiques or African antiques or anything like that. That's not really my purview. But from the standpoint of what's going on between the euro and the dollar, you are seeing the dollar decline eventually as existing inventories become exhausted. Like, I know the warehouse that we have is full right now, but as those supplies become exhausted, replenishing them is going to be more expensive if the dollar continues to fall. And right now, based on the inflation that's happening, there's no reason to think that the dollar wouldn't continue to fall unless you have some type of major socioeconomic event, which would drive the dollar higher. And that's quite possible as well. And of course, all of it's cyclical. You know, it goes up and down. So that's probably not the most important thing to focus on right now. But it is something that I wanted to mention. Now, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to cover before we exit this little video. But I guess all in all, right now, you're seeing a little bit of a lull, but that's the summer doldrums in my experience. And I don't see any reason why prices aren't going to continue to move higher. Obviously, a lot of the economic numbers are bad or getting worse, and a lot of people are calling for a recession. And of course, that we did talk about a few months ago in the last video as well, that possibility, and it does seem to be moving more in that direction. And I suspect that if that does happen, that will impact different segments of the antiques markets a little bit differently. But overall, with the type of inflation that we're having, I would suspect that on a lot of the nicer items, the prices are going to remain high, even if overall demand falls for a lot of different things. And at the same time, you have to keep in mind that this inflation doesn't just affect antiques. And when you're talking about useful items like furniture, like tables, chairs, cabinets, things like that are actually useful, substitute products are going to be getting more expensive. And in fact, I've had customers tell me that. They say, you know, it's very expensive to go out and buy a brand new set of 6 chairs. And a lot of times the quality is not even that good. So as the prices for substitute products rise, that's also going to be another factor that keeps antique prices high. And that combined with the sustainability ideas, it's hard for me to think that prices would really fall too much. I mean, I can see scenarios in which they would, but according to what I've read and what I've seen, the prices have remained high. They've definitely gotten high over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. They continue to go up. In fact, just off the top of my head, I would say over the last 5-6 years, in the heavily carved wood market, it's probably up 30%. Would not surprise me at all if it was up 30%. So I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Please take a second to hit the like button. If you have any questions or comments, leave those below, because you know this is a place where we can all kind of learn together. And hit the like button. Do subscribe. There's going to be more content coming out soon. There's also another channel for those of you who might be interested in the day-to-day affairs of the shop itself, kind of what comes in and goes out. And I hope you've enjoyed this. I wish you a fantastic week, and we'll see you next time.